So hello and welcome to this YFP 202 webcast. I see Donnie, Dale, Pat, King in the room. Great to see you. And of course, our support team. Welcome to our elf Milka. And then we've got PJ out there. It's great to see you. So in January's webcast, we taught you how to set goals and create a 12-month plan for your business using the YFP Business Blueprint. And you can download the YFP Business Blueprint for free at yfp.works/blueprint. Now, this month's focus is all about the mindset, because once you've created your 12-month business plan, you'll need the right mindset to see it through, and the right mindset will give you a big head start toward your goals. Well, listen, if we haven't met, my name is Jody Steig, but you can call me Coach Jode. And I was 8 years old when my parents started their network marketing business in Shaklee in 1981. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to join them on Shaklee's yearly incentive trips and drive in the free bonus cars. So I wanted their lifestyle when I grew up, so I sponsored under them when I was 18. Now, we lived on Vancouver Island, and we wanted to grow our business globally. And we realized we needed to learn how to use the internet to build if we wanted to build beyond our island. So this was back in 1997. Back then, there were no online systems specific to Shaklee that we could use to find, sponsor, and educate our builders and customers via the internet. So with the help of a web developer in the Philippines, I put our 3-step sponsoring system online, and within a few months, using our new online system, I became a director. Now, I started letting other people use our online system, and that was the beginning of what is now Your Freedom Project. And Your Freedom Project, or YFP for short, was built to give us new possibilities for how we could build a Shaklee business. And it's now evolved into a complete 360-degree ecosystem of tools and training that help distributors find builders and customers as well as increase retention using highly effective educational marketing tools and strategies. And that is something that our next special guest speakers are all about. Yet, despite having all the training and tools that we could possibly offer here at YFP or you guys need, why do so few actually build the businesses they're capable of building? After all, this is a simple business. So, why do people fail? Well, the number one reason that I believe, and I think the leaders that I'm with tonight will agree, is mindset. And the mindset that you adopt for yourself will profoundly affect the way you lead your life. It can determine whether you become the person you want to be and whether you accomplish the things that you value. And successful masters and leaders have learned that they can affect their results with their mindset. The exciting thing is that your mindset is not fixed. You can adopt a growth mindset and cultivate new skills, qualities, and talents. And master coordinators have learned how to do this, and so can you. So would you like to know how they manage their mindset despite the challenges they encounter? If yes, you're in the right place. Now, in this YFP 202 webcast, you're going to listen to top leaders Hannah Sherapan and Jeannie Tuvel and discover the mindset strategies that master coordinators use to prime themselves for success. Now, if you stay to the end, we'll give you a link to download our new daily activity checklist free so that you'll know exactly what to do to fit the business into the nooks and crannies.
We love questions. We want to hear your questions. So if you have a question for us, please put it in the Q&A if you have a really specific question rather than putting it in the chat. That way we can see it, it doesn't get buried, and we can answer it at the right time. And then let's run our first poll, and then we'll get on to the exciting pieces. So have you ever read Shad's book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself? And so your options are, yes, I've read it, no, but not yet, I'd like to, or I have never heard of it. So let us know if you have or have not read that book. And it looks, Susan says, I'd love to read it. Excellent. Not yet. Okay. So that's good to hear. A few people have never heard of it. So this is good. You're going to be introduced to another, a great resource to just help with that inner self-talk, which is very exciting. So there we go. The chat or the poll has been done. So 63% of you have never heard of it, and 32% have not read it yet, but they'd like to, who have already read it. So way to go for those of you who know what book we're talking about. So that is something that you can win at the end of this webcast. So now I will pass it over to Jody, and let's introduce our speakers.
Yeah, and just special shout out too to, I see Merle and Stephanie Vora's out there. Avora, I believe you're the one who does the sign language, and now I feel bad because I can't remember any of the sign language that I watched on your thing there. She does an amazing job. What an incredible coach there. So let's talk about our first guest speaker, lifetime master coordinator Hannah Sherapan. Now, I first heard of Hannah when I was in my early teens. My parents were always listening to cassette tapes. They had suitcases of Shackley cassette tapes, and we were listening to business leaders, always trying to keep our mindset in the game, right? And I heard her share her Shackley story, and I was amazed how she'd overcome some serious health challenges after using Shackley products and the success they were having building their business. Now, in fact, Hannah does speak about a little bit about this in one of the recordings we have in our wellness center. So keep that in mind. Now, one thing I clearly remember is Hannah saying she didn't want to be a salesperson, so she didn't think the business was for her. So let's get you guys to type out who here was the same way. Like, I didn't want to sell. That was your hang up. And then you figured out you could teach. Feel free to say that was me. If Theola is Therese, same thing. Now, her upline, though, told her she could build this by teaching versus selling. And that was the key to her saying yes to building a Shackley business. And when we built YFP, her words stayed with me. So I was excited when she and Alan joined YFP. I still remember being in San Diego and listening to her talking as I was walking around. So I'm very honored to have her teach for us on this webcast. And I'll let Kristen introduce our other super special guest speaker, Jeannie Touvel.
Excellent. And I have to say, I am absolutely thrilled to be introducing Jeannie Touvel. She is a senior master coordinator and an incredibly dynamic leader. Jeannie understands the power of developing the right mindset for creating the drive and resilience needed to build a Shaklee or a thriving Shaklee business. So you may have heard Jeannie speak at other Shaklee events or at their yearly conference, and if so, you'll know what an inspiring speaker she is and the stories she tells that captivate her audience. So we're very excited and incredibly honored to have her speak for YFP for the very first time. And Jeannie and her husband Steve and Hannah and Alan have been in the business for over 40 years. So you know they've encountered their fair share of challenges building this business. They're living proof that having the mindset and they have the mindset secrets that you want to know. So I hope you're ready to take some notes. If you don't have a pen and paper handy, please go get one because there are some things that you're going to want to jot down. And tonight could be the night that you hear something that can change the trajectory of your life for the better in this business. So let's get to it.
Yay, we got them here. Technology worked. All right. So Jeannie and Hannah, let's let you gals take it away.
Okay.
Oh, and we've gone to the wrong.
Be asked to speak for YFP. And mindset actually is one of my very favorite topics because I think it's so responsible, not just for our results, but across the board. I think everybody that's been successful in Shaklee will tell you that. So one of the things that when we first were introduced to Shaklee, the person that introduced us said that personal development was going to be one of the major things that we would get from Shaklee. And that was great for me because I was always wanting to work on myself and improve. But what I was very excited about is when he said, you're going to get a PhD in this business. And I said, a PhD? And he said, yes, a PhD in people. And you know, he was so right because you will learn so much in this business about yourself, but also about communicating and dealing with spouses, with children, grandchildren, friends, as well as people you work with in the business. So one of the books that we have felt has been a very good one to talk about affirmations because we really believe the part of mindset is using affirmations, saying the same positive statement over and over. And we'll tell you more about that a little bit later. But when you say an affirmation, you always want to say it in the present tense. So it's always I am, whatever follows that. So there's a book by T. Harv Eker. That's E-K-E-R. It's called The Miracle Mind. And I love this book because one of the things that he tells you about is when you're saying your affirmations, he tells you at certain points that you touch your head and other points you touch your heart as you're saying it. So you start to really make that connection, that mind-body connection. So I hope you all to find that something valuable for you too. And you know, when we talk about self-development, when I first got into Shaklee, my background was I owned and operated and taught my own preschool. And my parents teased me later on that when I was great with the kids, but every time I'd have a parents' meeting, I'd hold my notes up in front of my face because I was embarrassed and uncomfortable seeing the adults. So now I've talked in front of thousands of adults. So it really does make such a difference. And one of the other things that go along with the mindset actually is commitment. Because once you make the commitment that this is it, this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to build the business, when that happens, something inside happens that opens you and makes you much more resilient and receptive to what all you need to know. So we were only in business 28 days, but our upline had asked, upline is the person who brought us into the business. And we are in the Mary Loomis organization. And she was going to be guest speaking in New York, which was 8 hours away from us. And our sponsor, our upline who brought us in, said, we want you to come to New York to get to hear Mary Loomis speak. Well, we wanted to hear her too, but the thought of traveling 8 hours in a car that died every second right-hand turn of the day, and to be able to take our 3 children with us and the expense involved, we really were concerned, but he told us it could change our lives. So we packed up everybody in the station wagon and took off for New York. One of the best decisions we've ever made in our life. I have to tell you that, we made that commitment, and I hope that that's how you all view it, whether it's going to the Shackley conference or just a commitment to the business overall. So one of the major things that Mary Loomis said that day that has stayed with me all these 42 years is she said that the only difference between master coordinators and everyone else is that master coordinators get knocked down more than anybody else. But the difference is they just keep getting back up. So we heard that, we developed the mindset that this is it. We're going for it. There are going to be setbacks. Things are going to happen that aren't going to be pleasant. They're going to not be the things that we want to have happen, but we're just going to keep getting back up. And of course, like anybody else who's been in business a while, there are ups and downs. But thank goodness we developed that mindset to know that the most important thing is to make that commitment and stay with it. And Jeannie has a great story also about with her upline. Do you want to tell that, Jeannie?
Sure. Thank you, Hannah, so much. Well, first of all, thank you to your Freedom Project for having us here, and to Hannah, because this was her brainchild to do mindset. And I'm a very content, skill-oriented person, but Hannah was absolutely right. It is all about mindset. And I didn't really learn about mindset from books. I have to be very honest. I didn't really read a lot of books in the beginning, and probably that was a mistake, probably why I didn't grow that fast in the beginning. But I learned a lot from watching people, watching people that have success. And one of those people was my upline, as Hannah mentioned. His name is Dick Dingle. And I really learned early on that quitting was not an option. And it's funny because we just had a young leader on Mission Possible. Her name is Ketsi Jean. And she quoted that same concept. Quitting is not an option. And that's probably one of the main things we learned early on in terms of mindset. And I learned that from Dick because when we met him, he had shared a story with us that they became masters quickly, 3 years. And then at the end of the 3 years, his oldest son had a terrible accident, and he actually became a quadriplegic from being on an ultralight plane. And I guess because their business was young, they decided to take care of their son for a year. And while they did that, they had to kind of ignore their business because that was their priority, was their son. And every leader that they had built stopped building the business. And so they were left with almost ground zero at the end of 3 years. And so most people would have quit. But he said he just loved Shackley. He believed in Shackley, and they were going to rebuild it. Can you imagine that? When I heard that story, I said, how'd you do that? But the most amazing part was he then ran an ad and found this couple in Long Island by the name of Sonny and Marlon Gottlieb. And Sonny and Marlon Gottlieb found the Tuvels. And the Gottliebs and the Tuvels have one of their largest legs now today. Their biggest business is under them. If they had quit when they lost everything, right around the corner was this organization that was waiting to be built. So that's part of my DNA. That's part of our DNA. I also watched that, this couple that they met in Long Island didn't happen like that. Because our first mindset is, oh, I'm going to find those 3 people. I'm going to find those superstars right away. But Dick told us and told me that, he called Sonny 36 times, not every day, but called him, talked about this, talked about that, built a relationship. This was before Zoom. And after 36 times, they finally agreed to meet, to hear about Shackley. How many of us would have kept on? We would have been afraid. Should I call that person the second or third time, So I learned the concept of consistency, of persistence. And finally, the last thing that I learned was working in depth from Dick Dingle, which was a very important concept, a mindset, in that Dick saw something in us that we didn't see in ourselves. I mean, we were little tiny people down there. We were two little teachers, hardly making any money, no business skills, nothing, very little confidence, to be honest. But he saw something in us. I don't know what it was. He sort of took us under his wing. And there were many things he did for us and with us, and Carol, his wife. But those three things, the idea that quitting was not an option, that you really needed to persist when you saw someone you really wanted to join your team, you don't give up on them until they hang up and say no. And then the third thing was, when you find someone, just make sure that the recruiting process takes a lot of touches, a lot of touches. It's not just after one time. And then when you find someone, make sure you work in depth. You take care of that person. You are there for them. And I think those three principles, just watching that in that person, Dick, really made a tremendous difference for me. It really created a mindset that I still have today. So, Hannah, that's kind of my story about Dick. I don't know, you've heard that story many times, but I tell you, every time I tell it, I still say, wow, am I glad I was able to observe that.
Absolutely. And, I think that one of the things we've all learned in this business too is that you just gave some great points, of course. But in addition to that, to recognize that one of the things that happens often, and this might be a difference in the mindset, I believe it is that a lot of people get to the level of business leader, the first level of director, and instead of continuing to build that organization, they go into a management mode. It's almost like, oh, I've arrived. And they sit back, and as soon as they go into the management mode, that slows down the growth mindset. And really, in this business, you never want to stop talking. I mean, some periods you'll maybe recruiting more than others, but you don't want to stop it at any point. And once you get into that comfort zone, which is the management mode too, is I guess a comfort zone, no one has ever been able to grow while they're in a comfort zone. I think that's a real important thing to remember. Often we'll say about grow, get out of your comfort zone. But if you think of it in reverse, that nobody can grow when they're comfortable. Growing means moving out of that comfort zone. And Jeannie, I know you and I have talked a lot, and some of the things you mentioned about why a lot of us need to build this business. What is a part of us that we need to do this?
Yeah, I think that is, it's so funny, Hannah. I just had a discussion this morning with one of our leaders. And she said when she was listening to the Danelle training, Danelle said, you have to reward yourself with something. And she says, I don't know what I should reward myself with. And I think one of the important parts about mindset is how you see yourself in this business and why you do this business. And from the very beginning, I had the mindset of being a servant leader. Now, I didn't make up that term. There is a book called The Servant Leader, and I think you and I, Hannah, I really know you now through the years. I just want everyone to know that when I wasn't a master, Hannah would stand behind me on stage and push me and say, one day you're going to be a master. So she was planting all those things in my head for so long. But the reason I admired Hannah and the reason I admired all those that came before me is that, again, I observed that they were servant leaders. They were there to serve people. This business is now not being authoritarian. It's not telling people what to do. It's really knowing that you have to persuade them and that you value their contributions. You value their thinking. And I think to create strong organizations, the mindset we have to have is that we can only do this when we edify, when we encourage, when we serve other people, actually when we place them first. Now, that's not to say that Hannah and I put ourselves second, although we do many times. But to us, in all the discussions we ever have every day, and we see each other sometimes during this season, it's always about how can I help that person? How can I serve that person? How can I help that person be better? How can I help them achieve their dreams? And so the mindset, although we're setting goals for ourselves, Hannah, right? It's really all about how can we serve that other person? And that to me is the reward. The reward is being able to see that in someone else. Wouldn't you agree, Hannah?
Absolutely. And
So from there,
in fact,
yeah, go ahead, please.
no, you go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. It's your turn.
I was just going to say that Deepak Chopra actually addresses that in
Yes.
his book, Creating Affluence. He actually mentions the only way to get what you want is to help other people achieve their goals.
And that's really a mindset.
I think that's wonderful. If we're helping somebody else and what we get as a result is terrific.
Absolutely.
But you
Anything
mentioned,
else that you
Jeannie,
want to share?
well, I wanted you to mention about, wanted you to mention what you've talked about, the skill with 2000. I thought that was a really good point to bring out.
Sure. I would be happy to. Another thing that Hannah and I spoke about was, when you come into this, part of the mindset you have to have is whether this is direct sales or this is network marketing. And I know for myself, when I came in, because I was not very good at recruiting people in the beginning and bringing them into Shackley, I sort of quit very early on that. And I stayed with the products, and I was going to sell the products because that was comfortable. That was rewarding. That was my comfort zone that Hannah spoke about. But after 3 years of not having a director, now Hannah and I had very different paths. Her and Alan built a lot of leaders early on. We did not. And it was because of that mindset. It was, I was just going to keep adding customers because I was fearful to build that network marketing model. But what I realized was I wasn't getting ahead because it was just addition, adding another customer. So one day, one of the people that I observed, God rest his soul, was Presidential Master Coordinator Gary Burke. And he said something that Hannah's referring to. He said, you have to really understand that there's a difference between selling $200 and creating $200,000. It's a skill to sell 2,000, and it really is. Right, Hannah, there are skills to do that. Presenting, finding the benefits, closing, asking the right questions. Those are all skills. But to build an organization of 200,000 or more, that's a strategy. And all of a sudden I realized my mindset was all about that skill of selling. Who was the next person I was going to promote it to? But the strategy is, how can I really create a vision for that person? Put them in that vision, have them accept that vision so they embrace that vision, and then they become part of what I'm creating and what they want to create. So that was, to me, such a turning point in my mindset, to go from the skill of selling 2,000 to the strategy of creating 200,000. Is that kind of where you wanted me to go with that, Hannah?
Yes, and everybody should know, and they probably already do, that you've been very successful using that strategy. So that's a real important point for people to know. And then we also know in our business, we always talk about the importance of telling our story. And even though that's not a mindset, it is in a sense, because when we are telling our story, we're revealing a lot about who we are. And that comes across to someone else that then might open them to their wanting that type of mindset too. So did you want to tell a little bit about the story?
Sure. Well, I agree with you. I think the story isn't necessarily a mindset, but the mindset is understanding how powerful your story is. And so many of us don't realize how powerful our stories are. And we also have to learn to share that story in a kind of exciting, interesting, motivating way. And for Shackley people, we're so used to telling our story for hours and hours and hours. But today, people don't want to hear from us for hours and hours and hours. So we've got to figure out how to tell that story in a very concise, short way, which is very hard for us. But our stories are very important. And I think of myself, Hannah, and I remember my story was very simple. And when I remember going to a big meeting and everybody was talking about cars and trips and yachts and all this stuff, it really turned me off because for me, I just wanted to have no more subtotals. And subtotals are when you go food shopping and you put everything on a conveyor belt and you ask somebody for a subtotal. And if you don't have enough money, you take the stuff off the conveyor belt. Now, that was a silly story, but it meant so much to me. And in the beginning, that story about my subtotals resonated with people. People were able to, what's the word I'm saying? What's the word I'm looking for? They could identify with that story, right? They could identify with it. So that became a powerful story. And as our business evolved, the story became very important. Our story that, our first checks, like many of you, were $4, $6, $10, maybe $20. And today I can tell people that our organization, sells over 800,000 in a month. That's a story. Now, I couldn't tell that in the beginning. Nobody would have believed it anyway. But as you evolve in this business, you add layers to that story. And I'll tell you the truth, when we were young, and I think Hannah would agree, I would sit almost at the feet of some of the masters and just listen to the stories. Because it was in those stories that I learned the mindset of what created a master. And so it's like children. When you put them to bed, what do they say, Hannah? Tell me a story.
Good story, right? And
Tell me a
one of the
story.
things I love when you share that, because we did that very same thing when we started going to the conventions. I think every single time we would make it a goal how many master coordinators we get to talk to and find out their stories. And then anybody else who was on stage that was successful, we always have wanted to know that. And I think that's really a real growth process too for us all, by learning and absorbing all that. So when you all are going to go to Kansas City to the conference, make sure that that's what you're going to do. You're going to talk to as many masters as you can, go to all the award winners and gather that information, because it'll just make such a difference for you. You'll really find yourself incorporating, even whether you realized you would or not.
Right, Hannah. And I was just thinking, we should really modernize that story today. A lot of people put that story on social media. If you watch the posts, it's one story after another. Some of them are short, some of them are long, but they're their stories, whether it's how they're cooking that day, what their kids are doing, it's their stories. And that makes the connection with people. So even though we kind of build it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't build it face to face and tell our stories, but today those stories are done on social media, which actually magnifies our story by 1,000%, maybe even 1,000,000%, I don't know. And the more effective we are in telling that story with the elements that are important, the more successful we can be. Any other thoughts, Hannah, or should we what do you think?
Yeah, I have a couple of other thoughts. Well, first of all, what you're just describing now, Jeannie, I think is terrific. But don't wait till you feel like you really have it down pat. Take a risk and go ahead and put that story on. Get better by doing, because you'll grow that way for sure. And so one of the other things we were talking about when Jeannie and I were discussing the subject is, when you are building and you are finding these other people you're going to be working with, remember that the only way you can treat everybody equally is to treat everybody differently. And what I mean by that is that each person has, because of their personality, whatever the reasons, they learn differently or they receive things differently. Some people crave recognition. Other people say, oh, don't even mention it. I don't want to hear it. So when you think in the terms of finding what works for your business builders and your business leaders, so that you could connect with them that much more, and think about where you see yourself now, and then how you want to see yourself. It's a real good thing to say when you are working with people, to try and, first of all, that's going to help you to get to know them better, so you know where to take them next. but also it helps them to get to know themselves better as well, because they'll be doing that self-exploration. And Wayne Dyer, I think everything he wrote was terrific. I'm a fan of him greatly. And one of the things he said, remember I was mentioning affirmations in the beginning, and we've talked about that so many times, Jeannie, the value of affirmations. One of the things he says in his book is that if you just say your affirmations, it's just like you could just be reading words from a page in a book. Until you get to the feeling level, it's never going to have the same effect. So he said that you keep saying it until you can actually feel it. So when you're going to say, I am a master coordinator, and you're not even yet a master coordinator, when you get to the point where you feel it and you can actually see that happening for you, that's when it will really take place. So, Jeannie, do you have anything you want to add to that, or do you want to just tell a little bit about what you said about leadership?
Yes. So I've just changed my scenery because my computer crashed again. So it's a good thing we were set up for all that. Part of being a mindset of a master is you never know what's going to happen in the next minute, so you have to be prepared. I was just sharing again that I have something on my desk, not here in Florida, but in New York, and it says a leader looks at their organization every day, not the way it is, but what it would look like in the future. And I know that I'm coaching a few people who want to be masters. And what stops them many times is that they look at where they are today, they look at where their team is today. Well, life is about what is today, but it's also about what it's going to look like tomorrow. And I think that's the vision, right? The vision. And I guess, you know, I want you to understand that for Hannah and I, this didn't happen overnight. We did have fears, we did have hesitations, we didn't do everything right. We didn't know how to do everything right. But in my case, I decided
that's true.
Yes, sure. In my case, it was to really observe those that had the mindset that I admired. And everyone has different levels of admiration, right? They all do. And what I saw was the people that I admired had a kind of thinking of the future, what things could look like, where people could be, what they could experience, what they could have in their life. Remember, we talked about serving others.
Yeah.
So for me, the mindset is, what is it going to look like? And that's wonderful because that's your imagination. And being around Hannah, who has has a thinking of abundance, which I love, and I know she's worked on that her whole life, it comes as just second nature. And when I gave Hannah this quote that I use all the time, you had something that you felt was just as important. Remember? Would you want to close with that? Because I think that'd be very powerful for everyone.
Sure. Well, you've heard Jeannie and me both today refer a few times to quitting no longer being an option. Well, to extend that just a little bit further, when quitting is no longer an option is when you figure out how to make it work. Okay, so we turn it back over to Kristen and Jody. Thanks, Jeannie. It was great doing this.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure.
I'm still trying to absorb all this. I've got all these notes that I'm scribbling down. This has been fantastic. I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of the points, and maybe Kristen, you could share as well. One of them was 37 follow-ups. Amazing. I mean, we hear the number 7 and 8 and stuff like that. So way to go to Dick. And I remember speaking to Dick a long time ago, and I loved his story because didn't he find out about Shackley on the back of an airplane seat in a magazine or something like that because he was a pilot?
No, he didn't find it that way, but that's how he found the Gottliebs. He actually had a customer present it to him because the customer thought he had this great advertising business, but he didn't know all the debt that Dick had. And so that's how that came about. But he would be fat. I mean, he's 96 years old. Yeah. And I got to tell you, today, he could still teach us things.
Oh, I can imagine. This was powerful for me when you mentioned that you adjusted your mindset to network marketing versus direct sales. You know, we sort of
Yes.
think of mindset as being more like I have a positive mindset or a negative mindset. And we don't sort of realize that mindset actually has so many facets. It can be the way you think about protein, for example. Like if you think it doesn't taste good, then that's your mindset versus my mindset is it fills my cells or whatever. So I thought that was important. And the 2K versus 200,000, I think we could do like a whole webinar on that, moving from a skill to a strategy, Jeannie. That was golden.
Yeah, that was actually, again, I give that totally to Gary Burke. That was his saying. Hannah was taught that too. That was a turning point for a lot of us. And that's when you turn from, I was told that an organization is when you have at least 25 leaders or more. It's that same thing. Well, I have a group, I have a business. Well, no. You have an organization when you have at least 25 leaders. So it's really good to know parameters because then you have something to, right, to Hannah, to look forward to or to aim at, I would say. But we won't do that seminar. You have to find somebody else for that because I think we don't know. But it is a good thing. We spend a lot of time with content and skills, but actually this business is all about strategy.
I love that. And you guys were both teachers. I know Hannah, of course, was, but Jeannie,
Yes.
both you and Steve were teachers, right?
Yes, I was. I actually had the same background as Hannah. I started out in nursery school, and then because there weren't a lot of jobs at the time, I was a fourth grade teacher, and Steve was an elementary school art teacher.
So that means you
So,
also
yes,
had to
we
change
all.
mindsets of students.
It's an interesting question. To be honest, that transition was easier for me because I think Hannah and I have always spoken that Shackley is definitely, as you guys know at YFP, a teaching business.
Right.
That's why I was very connected to YFP because you understood that in the beginning. So that was not, to me, your leaders and your business builders are just big students. They don't move around, but they still have ADD, HD, and they still lose their focus and they still don't do all the assignments. So it's really not that different. So that was not a big thing. I think going from teaching to Shackley was the difference was we had caps as teachers. No matter how many courses you took, you could just earn. You had a ceiling. The
Right.
difference of being a teacher in Shackley is there is no ceiling, really. It's up to you. So that's the difference, really.
That's something for folks for you to note down. Maybe type that in the chat if that's meaningful to you. No cap for learning, right? For the more you learn, the more you earn. Whereas in the regular job world, you do run into the ceiling and they got to move on or somehow become the president or whatever. And Hannah,
somebody fires you.
Yeah, somebody fired you. Yeah. I thought Hannah was powerful in what you said. Feel it and then see it, and that's when you gain the momentum. And maybe you can just say that one more time because you're so strong with affirmations and mantras. Could you just dig into that a little bit more?
Yes. Well, I actually wanted to share something with you real briefly, how this actually came to be with me. When I had been very ill, I had Crohn's disease, and I had to drop out of college a few different times and kept going back. And I did not finish when Alan and I wanted to get married. And my father made me promise that if we went ahead and got married, that I would still finish college. Well, then children came along, and I was put aside for a while. But I really wanted to go back because I really felt a need to do that for my father, even more than for myself. But I couldn't seem to bridge that. And a friend of mine taught me about affirmations. And she said, I'd like you to do me a favor. Would you do this for 30 days? And after 30 days, if you don't see things change in your life, that'll be okay. I'll never ask you to do it again, but just promise me you'll do it for 30 days. And I did. And by the end of 30 days, I was enrolled to do my last steps in my education. And Alan actually took time off from insurance to be a stay-at-home dad while I was doing student teaching. But, it was changing my life. Well, once I saw that it could have that kind of effect, I was just sold on the value of affirmations for health, and as far as certainly building a business. And using for many other things, personal relationships. There are a lot of benefits of doing those affirmations.
And I think one thing for you guys, I'm glad you shared that, Hannah. For you guys watching, did you notice how Jeannie and Hannah both recognized they were able to sort of self-evaluate that I have this mindset and I need to move to this mindset? I think a lot of times we don't see that. And so I think that's powerful. Kristen, did you have a final thought before we kind of began to wrap up? You wanted to share with the guys?
Well, actually, the ones that you brought up, Jody, were all the ones that came up to me. But the biggest one, the two biggest ones, was one, Hannah, with the stories piece. When you and Jeannie were both talking about how important it is to share your story, and like Jeannie said, it's you layer things on. Your story will evolve and layer up as you progress and as you move forward. But understanding how important your story is, even though it seems trivial to you at the time, it can be a complete game changer for somebody hearing it. And I thought that was really important because I know for myself and for a lot of people that I've worked with, we have a hard time sharing that story, but it is so powerful. And when we can really understand that and understand what it is for someone to hear that and how that can be something that, like you said, it resonates with them, they understand exactly what that means. The subtotal piece, I understood what that meant, been there, and it creates a lot of emotion in people, right? So really honing in on the story. And then of course, just to build on what you brought up too, Jody, was going from that, you could sell 2,000 PV, or you could build an organization that moves to 200,000 in volume, and just shifting that mindset from the direct sales to the building an organization, I think is so powerful and opens up a lot of doors. So those are the two things that I come up.
And
Yeah,
Hannah was going to say something, and then we just got a few people in Q&A, I believe. Kristen, you could double check that. Hannah, I think you were going to speak to a point.
Pardon me?
Oh, I just saw you leaning forward that maybe you had a thought you wanted to share. Kristen, let's go to Q&A. And do we have any questions for Hannah and Jeannie from our listeners?
We have two questions, both from PJ Myers. And PJ's wondering, what was the one thing that did the most to change your mindset?
Should we start with Hannah? What was the epiphany?
Well, I think I probably already really explained that. Once I saw the power of it and getting me back into schooling and getting my degree and moving forward, I'd always wanted to open a preschool and being able to do all that. So I think it was my friend urging me to take that opportunity to give it that 30-day trial. I think that was probably the biggest thing for me.
I love it. Well, listen, thank you, Hannah and Jeannie. What you shared was so inspiring and full of insightful nuggets of wisdom. I'm going to have to go and watch it again. You've helped me for next week's Networkers University. And I want to point out that even though Hannah and Jeannie have been successful leaders for many years, they still keep themselves in learning mode. I mean, after all these years, they still attend training, they read books and watch educational content. It's amazing. Research shows that leaders who are in learning mode develop stronger leadership skills than those who don't. And learning is key to coming up with new ideas that will improve your business and ensure success. So to help you stay in learning mode, we hope you'll enroll in Networkers University, where we'll continue teaching the master's mindset for the next 3 weeks, and you'll get access to our new upcoming classes scheduled for this year. After the mindset, we're going to move into social media, where we're going to do the Facebook Prospecting Academy and then Email Marketing Academy. And you can review archive material with leadership content that we did last year, for example, with Jim Hatchell, and also other speakers such as Jennifer Glacken on the grand openings and some other great content. So we're making it easier than ever to enroll in Networkers University with our Leaders Are Learners promo. Stick around and I'll get into that in more detail after our final poll.
Is what mindset challenge is holding you back from success? So is it the first one, I have a lot of fear. Number 2, I have negative people in my life. 3, I have mental baggage. 4, I have belief issues. Or 5, I don't have mindset challenges. So let us know in the poll, or if the poll doesn't pop up, you're welcome to put that in the chat as well. Either way will work great. And you got a couple more seconds to answer that poll, just so that we can see where everybody is. And
we're going to talk a bit about that on Networkers University as well. the kind of fears.
Mhm.
We in Romy Neustat's book, Get Over Your Damn Self, she queried or polled a business leader group, and it was amazing the list of fears people had. And that's something that's important to kind of get out because that's part of the baggage. So, Kristen, what are the results there?
All right, the results are 20% have a lot of fear, 17% have negative people in their life, 22% have mental baggage, 28% have belief issues, and then there's a lucky 13% that don't have any mindset challenges, at least at this time. So way to go.
I love it.
Excellent.
Mental baggage. We need to go on a plane trip to Bahamas and leave that baggage there or something like that.
Yes, we do. I'll
So
take it.
if you're not ready to buy just yet, we understand. What you could do, we'd love to have you do this, is book a free discovery call to see how we can help. And what we'll do is set you up for a guided tour. And we will show you the prospecting process that you can use to introduce your prospects to the Shaklee business opportunity, or introduce them to the concept of wellness and nutrition, and then move them into the vitamin checklist so they'll know what to look for in the best vitamin. And that makes it much simpler when you're then going to connect them to Meology or any other product line, because now they know what to look for, right? So if you'd like to talk to an expert, drop your name, phone, and or email into the chat here or in Facebook. Now you can do it privately here in Zoom by selecting the names drop down and choosing panelists only. So down at the little bottom in the chat, it says to, in my case, it says everyone. You can pick that little drop down and then change it to panelists only. And then we'll be the only ones that see your name and email if you don't want to share it with everyone. Okay. And you can book a call if you just want to go right there and just book an appointment. We'd love for you to do that by going to yourfreedomproject.com/explore. Or you could take a 30-day test drive of our system, and you can do that by visiting yourfreedomproject.com/trial. And that will allow you to see the wellness center, see the emails that we're sending every week to your clients, and the live events and all the goodies that we use. Yeah. And then let's have a final wrap up. Let's close up. So again, I just wanted to cheer Jeannie on too. Jeannie, I was amazed at how smooth that transition was. When your computer crashed and you showed up on the next one, I wouldn't have even known it other than your background changed. So there's the preparation of a master. It is not about being tech savvy to win in this business. I'll tell you that much. So again, if you guys can all give Jeannie and Hannah a super congratulations and a thank you. And if you're on live stream, giving them hearts and love and all that. And let's just let Jeannie and Hanny, if you can just say a final words and we'll wrap it up.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
What's your final good night to everyone?
A final good night. Gee, we just like you all to expand your mindset and join us at the top. I used to love the phrase, see you at the top. So we haven't used that in a long time, but we sure would love to see more of you at the top with us. It would be just so great.
And Hannah?
Well, and when we're doing that mindset, remember that when you do have that negative self-talk, it's very simple. Just take your mind, your mind's eye, and move the negative picture to the right and replace it with how you want things to be.
I love it. And you got to make a commitment that that this has got to work. I think that was important. And then you can make the run for the roses. And these two gals know what run for the roses means. So hopefully you guys do as well. That means run for master. So thanks everyone. We appreciate you so very much.